With the building of the toll road, at any point will this lower taxes or higher taxes for Texas residents?
Well, ultimately, the issue related to tolls is that if you look at what we've been doing, the hole we've been digging in terms of transportation funding in the state of Texas, now looking back with 20/20 hindsight, you could see that at some point, if you're going to build any new capacity, you're going to need to do something other than what we had. And here's what I mean by that. We basically froze the #1 funding source in the state of Texas. I say we. That was before my time in the legislature. Somebody, they froze the gas tax, which is the primary source of revenue to build transportation improvements, at a 1991 level. Well, of course, inflation has taken off. So what we started seeing TxDOT do a few years back is they would say, well, we'll build this state project, but only if the local community will bring matching funds. And at first it was like 10% matching funds, and then it went to 15%, and then on up and on up. And ultimately what they started saying is, now what we're going to do is new capacity needs to be built with a user fee. In addition, the hole that we dug ourselves is that the legislative leadership diverted that gas tax money. You know, you raise a certain amount of money with gas taxes, that when you pay that gas tax, you think that money is going to go to pay for transportation improvements. But in the last session of the legislature, the legislative leadership condoned the passage of legislation that in our budget took $1.6 billion of that fundamentally transportation fund and diverted it to pay for things like the Department of Public Safety, to pay for oil and gas litigation and mineral rights litigation in the Attorney General's office. It even pays for a small amount for the Lufkin Tourist and Information Bureau, which I'm sure is a very fine place, but your gas tax dollars aren't paying for roads. Instead, what they're doing is they're paying for things like that. The public needs to know that kind of thing, because ultimately that's what leads to alternative ways of funding capacity, such as toll roads. That's why it comes into play.
Yeah, I think the senator's right, is that if you take Fund 6, which is the account that he's talking about, and you take $1.6 billion, that builds a lot of roadways. So I think it's a combination of things. I think roadways in Texas are going to be built differently. I think tolling is certainly one of the options, and I guess we look at it more of a toolbox. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox, but you can't take out half the hammer and put the other half back in and say, there you go. And so I think if we can find that balance, the gas tax, moving Fund 6 dollars back to its original purpose, using some tolls, I think that combination is what's going to help us build some toll roads and additionally help the taxpayer.
That's right.
And why would we be having the Spanish company?
Well, you're going to have that one. Here's my thing. You need to ask the governor that question.
I'm so glad you did that.
You need to ask somebody else that question, because the answer to that is yet to really have been revealed.
Okay.
And it doesn't make sense to me that question this far into the process is still being asked and there's not a good answer to it. There are ways to do this. I happen to believe that we shouldn't be selling off our public infrastructure. There are ways to finance things, as has just been suggested.
Bonding.
There are different kinds of bonding. There might even be, I could see utilizing private equity money, but it needs to be an investment. It shouldn't be something where the private company gets to come in and own my road.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that they come in and they lease my road. It shouldn't be that they come in and can dictate how my road is used.
Exactly right.
If they want to invest,
then
well, they can invest.
Part
it
of
might
the portfolio.
Yeah, that's right. And part of and they take a risk.
That's right.
But the answer to your specific question, that needs to go to somebody who hadn't yet answered that question.
And I think that our organization would agree is that, you know, if you look at where the road lies, there was only one set of folks that brought in this whole idea of Centra and producing the road. We think that a public-private partnership is there, and the question that we have is some of the documentation that we've seen, I'm sure you've seen it too, Senator, is that this company stands to make billions of dollars off this roadway. So our question is If they can do it, why can't the state do it?
Very, very well said. And here's the other thing that was a problem during the legislative session, and gave people like me a lot of heartburn, and I yelled about it a whole lot. Is that when you have those kinds of relationships, one of the things that TxDOT was trying to work into that process was non-compete clauses. Right. So that, for example, if the private company, the Spanish company, builds a road, and let's just say it goes from A to B here, but later the public determined they need another road, and they wanted to build another road, they wouldn't be able to build a parallel road because it would compete with that road and diminish the profits. And if that's not the way to do public policy.
That's right. And if they did compete, well, and they went ahead and built the road, well, then they would have to pay the state would have to pay the private company some funds because of the competition. We don't think that's right.
We fought that very hard, and in fact, you had a great majority, a super majority, if you will, of the Texas Senate passing legislation to try to stop just that kind of thing.
Why do you believe there's such a lack of transparency in the overall, TTC issue?
Well, I think a big part of the reason is that it was an idea or a thought process that some decided they were going to just make it happen. And often when those kinds of things happen that way, you see it a lot in government, you don't get the kind of transparency you need. It has backfired. I think the fact that they didn't do it right, where they gained public input, they educated the public, and then they tried to figure out good approaches that didn't include some of the things that we've been critical of here right now, it's backfired on them. And I think now, that's during the sunset process, during this process where joint committees in the Senate, like where you have finance and transportation meeting together to cross-examine and question these kinds of lack of transparency, I think it's backfiring, and I think ultimately the people are going to get a bigger say in it.
Well, my last question today would be, what will Texas' future look like, and are any of us really planning for it?
Well, my personal view is that we are not doing the kind of job on a variety of levels, whether it's transportation or higher education or health care. We are not doing the kinds of things in the state of Texas right now where we are preparing for our future. Here's a perfect example of it. We're talking about transportation. We know we are a growing state. We're growing both organically and we're growing by invitation so that we can have a strong economy. But we have not prepared for that growth, and so that now we're facing gridlock. And in my view, instead of doing the appropriate things in terms of financing to make sure that we can make the kinds of investment, we find ourselves in a hole. Transportation is one area, but we could talk about higher ed. We could talk about the fact that we have more uninsured people in this state than any other state in the union, and more children and elderly, and what we're doing about those things. I think it's time for Texas to start thinking in an open, accountable way and start thinking big again about where it wants to be 20, 30, and 40 years from now.
Okay. So you don't think any of this non-transparency has anything to do with pushing the North American agenda, North American Union?
I hear about that, and I'm not sure I know the answer to that question, but I will tell you this. There has been such a lack of transparency that if we don't take a can opener and open up that agency, we're all going to be at risk. And so I think it's important for us to shine a light on that agency. I certainly it seems like I spend most of my days as a state senator these days trying to crack open that agency and get straight answers.